In December 2023, I made a video about the Tesla strike in Sweden. That was more than a year ago, so I'm sure that it's all resolved by now. Tesla and the Swedish unions must surely have come to an agreement by now, right? Oh, let's see what's happened during this last year. Last year, a massive strike started in Sweden between Tesla and one of the biggest unions in the country. It's one of the biggest labor conflicts in Sweden in recent years, and it's an important conflict for both Tesla and Sweden for different reasons. For Sweden, it's a matter of showing international companies that they must abide by Swedish laws and customs if they want to do business in Sweden. For Tesla, it's important to not give in because it would open up the floodgates for unions in bigger markets like Germany or maybe even the US. It all boils down to collective bargaining agreements. I explained all of this in my previous video, but let me give you a quick recap. The Swedish union IF Metall wants Tesla to sign a collective bargaining agreement. Tesla doesn't want to, so IF Metall went on strike. That strike escalated, and more unions joined in sympathy strikes. People did their best to ensure that Tesla wouldn't be able to do business in Sweden until they signed the agreements. Tesla, on the other hand, tried to circumvent these strikes by introducing strike breakers or finding legal loopholes so that they could continue to deliver cars to Sweden. And why are collective bargaining agreements so important to Swedish unions? Well, that's because of the Swedish model. More than 70% of Swedish workers belong to a union. That's because the Swedish model is a collaboration between employers and unions without state intervention. The unions and the employers mostly govern themselves without Swedish law getting in the way, but that requires cooperation between employers and unions. And one thing that just about every bigger company in Sweden agrees with is to sign a collective bargaining agreement. That is, every company except Tesla. At least that's what some people claim, but it isn't true. There are many companies in Sweden that don't have collective bargaining agreements, especially within the transportation and the construction sectors. But it's still 77% of companies in Sweden that have such an agreement. But for Tesla, that's something that they're just not willing to agree with. So what's happened in this conflict in the last year? The last thing I reported in my video from 2023 was that Tesla was gonna sue the Swedish Transport Agency and the PostNord delivery company because they refused access to new registration plates. In November 2023, the Swedish District Court sided with Tesla and decided that the Swedish Transport Agency must allow Tesla to retrieve registration plates to not cause undue harm to Tesla and their customers. However, in December 2023, PostNord claimed force majeure and still refused Tesla to retrieve their registration plates. And by December 7, the Solna District Court agreed with PostNord, and Tesla weren't allowed to fetch their registration plates themselves. Also, the Swedish Court of Appeal reversed the previous decision that sided with Tesla. So at this point it seemed that things weren't exactly going well for Tesla. On December 5th, the Danish 3F Transport Union issued a strike notice against Tesla in sympathy with IF Metall. And on December 6th, the Norwegian Fellesforbundet also announced a sympathy strike. The Finnish Transport Union announced a blockade against loading and unloading Tesla cars on December 7. And during December 13 and 14, more unions announced sympathy strike notices against Tesla. However, everyone wasn't happy with the strikes and the actions against Tesla. In the comment section to my previous video, some people pointed out that there are quite a few Swedes who don't agree at all with the unions. That became apparent on December 20, 2023, when IF Metall ejected a number of members from their union. I'm not sure how many or why, but it's definitely a sign that all wasn't well within the union ranks. And that's basically the last thing that happened in 2023, so let's move on to 2024. On January 12, the strike was starting to have an effect, but not exactly in a good way. Hydro Extrusions, a company that was affected by the strike, had to let people go because of it. Then on May 1st, IF Metall lifted the strike against Hydro Extrusions because they were no longer delivering parts to Tesla. IF Metall also had to temporarily ease the strikes against the workshops on February 19 so that people could repair their Teslas. But that wasn't really the main battle. Allowing people to repair their cars made perfect sense, and Tesla had already moved the production to China and the US for the parts supplied by Hydro Extrusions. Instead, the main battle of 2024 concerned delivery of registration plates. During May, there were even more sympathy strikes announced, particularly by SECO, the Service and Communications Union. They were trying to ensure that Tesla couldn't deliver registration plates to customers. On June 12, Tesla appealed their registration plate blockade to the Swedish Supreme Court. The Supreme Court had previously refused to take up the case against PostNord, but maybe Tesla would have better luck this time. Spoiler, no they didn't. In August, the Supreme Court announced that the previous Court of Appeals ruling against Tesla still stands. And then followed even more sympathy strikes between June and October. If you've ever done business with a Swedish company, then you know that the whole country of Sweden basically closes down in summer. So nothing of significance happened in all of July because everyone was outside trying to enjoy some sun instead. But the strikes picked up again in August and September, and the SECO union in particular focused on blocking registration plate deliveries. And just how successful has that been? By October 3rd, Tesla sales were at an all-time high despite the strike. IF Metall claimed that all deliveries of registration plates were blocked, but the newspaper Arbetet tracked thousands of plates being delivered to unrelated companies. A random tech company got one batch of plates, and a machine workshop got another batch. And these companies then helped Tesla distribute registration plates to customers. Last year, on October 17, 2023, the very first strike notice against Tesla was issued. At that time, Kurt Eriksson, a man with 10 years of experience in sensitive conflicts, was appointed mediator. 1 year after he was appointed, Kurt Eriksson said in an interview that he's given up. There's no way to resolve the conflict because both sides refuse to budge. On October 25th, Tibor Blomhäll, president of Tesla Club Sweden, said that the strike hasn't really affected Tesla at all. Tesla is used to problems in the US as well. Customers have had to pick up their own registration plates, just like they do in Sweden now. So what the Swedish unions believe is a big problem for Tesla is something they've already lived with for 15 years. Tibor Blomhäll himself is actually part of a union though, and he believes that Tesla should have given in from the start and simply blamed it on the Swedish model. But now there's too much prestige involved and the whole world is watching this conflict. Tesla refuses to budge, and IF Metall says that they've barely scratched the surface of their strike funds. So as the Tesla strike turns 1 year old, happy birthday, then it unfortunately seems like it's a strike that could last for many years to come. The annoying thing about all of this is that it seems like this whole strike could have been avoided. Tesla's main point has been that they don't sign any collective bargaining agreements ever. Except that they've already done that in France in 2021. Tesla France has signed 3 agreements with the French union CFDT. And it seems like their business in France hasn't collapsed despite that. This was apparently something that Tesla wanted to keep secret because it wasn't brought to light until November 2024. It raises the question of whether or not it can act as a catalyst to open up negotiations once more. But for now at least, Tesla refuses to comment, and we're still locked in this stalemate, like we've been for the last year. The Tesla strike continues, and things might change in Sweden as a consequence of it. There's been a lot of debate whether or not the state should be involved in strikes like these. And something else that's been talked about is that there's no law against strike breakers. It's heavily frowned upon for a company to bring in strike breakers, and it goes against the Swedish model. But it's not illegal. In fact, Tesla is actually relatively unique in doing so. So a question that's emerged is whether or not it should be regulated by law. There's also different opinions if the Swedish unions will come out of this strike stronger or weaker. The unions have shown a great deal of solidarity, both within Sweden and in all of the Nordics. But at the same time, the strike isn't really doing all that much. It's a toothless strike that isn't really affecting Tesla all that much. So people are questioning how useful the unions really are, and that's definitely not the outcome that IF Metall wants from this strike. We basically have a case of an immovable object meeting, well, another immovable object, and the Swedish model might be at stake. I don't really see how this status quo will change. If Tesla and the Swedish unions are still at it 1 year from now, well, I guess I might make one more follow-up video. But to be honest, I'm not sure if anything significant will have changed by then. And that's about it for this summary of how the Tesla strike in Sweden has progressed, or rather not progressed, since December 2023. I hope you found it interesting. Like and subscribe, but most importantly, have a great day.